You basically take two rhyming words that rhyme with a number that is like, that'll resonate with you, and then you go progressively higher every time you have to change your.
Hi, Jen.
How are you?
Hi, Rhoda.
Are you still basking in the glory of your award?
I am.
Good, as you should be.
Hey, Jen, on the 20th, if I'm done by like 5, that's second, survey, there was a date, I think that was wrong, so I assumed it was, I think it said December, but it was supposed to be January or,
Oh,
so I assumed it was January
okay.
30, I think it was the 30th. I think it said December 30th, and I assumed January, so,
I think that's a fair assumption. Thank you for letting me know.
yes.
Yeah, no worries. I think we need a minute too. Thank you. So Shannon is not here because she is doing the superintendent search for District 57. I have a statement from her that I'll read during board reports. That's an update on that process.
It's real.
Hi, Terrell.
Good afternoon. How are you guys?
Hi, Terrell.
How are you? Have a few
Hi.
reports for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm Michelle's colleague.
I am.
Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Jen. So nice to meet you. Thanks for being here. Thanks very much.
Team who are in the virtual meet, also Lance and other reps from Clifton Larson Allen, our auditing partners. So we know you're going to be happy with the report that we present this evening. Director Chapanduka's team and the reps from this audit firm have been engaged in many, many hours of work looking over our finances and making sure that we are following all of the regulations and policies. So we are pleased to present you with some information this evening and also take your questions after that. Director Chapanduka.
Okay, I haven't done this in a while, so I hope I'm getting it right. Thank you, Dr. Reid. Good evening, Chair Bouchard. Good evening, board members. With me tonight is, am I okay? Okay. With me tonight is Lance Longer, Director at CLA, Clifton Larson and Associates, who are our district auditors, and will be presenting the executive summary of our fiscal year 21 audit. I would like to thank the team in business office and other departments in the district, starting with Jason Stegman, our controller, Robin Budensek, our district accountant, Tim Kamen, our data analyst, our payroll team, Jackie and Ken, our procurement coordinator, Chris Boyce, our revenue accountant, Beth Kolas-Volk, our accounts payable specialist, Jackie and Evangelista, Alice for coordinating all this work. I would like to thank Lance, Michelle Hoffman, principal at Clifton Larson and Associates, Nancy Anderson in IDL, and numerous other individuals who actually work behind the scenes to make sure that we get a comprehensive audit. We know from their perspective, from the auditor's perspective, how the district is doing financially. Looking from the outside in, this is very critical for the district, for us to get an unqualified opinion on how we are doing from a compliance standpoint, how we are following Minnesota Department of Education financial parameters, federal requirements. For this year, it was a bit different because we also had to factor in the federal dollars we received with the ESA components, so they did audit that. They also did audit our single units with food services and special education. That being said, I would like to present the opportunity to Lance to update the board and the community how this district did in fiscal year 21. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrell. First off, I would like to, start out as well by thanking Terrell, Jason, and the rest of the finance staff here at the district for doing such a great job and helping us get this audit completed. An audit is a lot of work in a normal year, and this obviously was not a normal year. There's a lot of additional work with all the additional federal funding that came through, not to mention everything else that they had to work through at the district as well. So to help us kind of complete the audit, it was a ton of additional work, and just want to thank everyone at the finance department here for helping us complete the audit this year. I want to run through our executive audit summary. It's just kind of a high-level summary of the financial statements. Just kind of summarizing some of the key points in the financials. And to do that, I'll start out on page 1. This is kind of the most important page. And starting at the top there is our audit opinion. That's the piece that you are looking for from us. And I'm glad to say that we are providing a clean or unmodified audit report this year. That is the highest opinion that we can provide for a Minnesota school district. So everything looks good from an audit perspective there. Next on that list is the Yellow Book compliance. So as part of the audit, we also look at government auditing standards, and I'm glad to report there are no compliance issues to report this year as well. As part of that, as part of our audit, we also look into internal controls. These are any reviews or anything like that are in place, the simplest one to look at is a cash bank rec. We're looking for multiple people having eyes on things. There's a check system in place. One person produces a report, another person reviews that report. If we saw any concerns, we would note that and have any material weaknesses noted. I'm glad to report, as far as internal controls go, we have no material weaknesses to report this year. Single audit, Terrell kind of touched on this already a little bit. This year, single audit programming, it kind of depends year to year on which programs we are testing, depending on which programs, how much funding there is in programs, what programs are ongoing each year. And it's required for any school district that receives over $750,000 in federal funding. This year, because of multiple factors, we end up having to test 4 programs, which is is a lot compared to certain years. Some years we only test one. So there was quite a bit of additional testing that was required this year. We tested the child nutrition cluster, the special education cluster, coronavirus relief fund, and the education stabilization fund. In that, all that additional testing, we did note one significant deficiency related to child nutrition procurement, specifically for suspension and debarment. During testing, we actually tested 5 different items, and there was one that came up with this issue. And I believe, talking to the finance staff, there was some communication with a vendor, and there was some language in a contract that they couldn't sign. So overall, there were 4 other items that we tested where this procedure is happening. It just did not occur for one item. And in the grand scheme of things, with 4 single audit programs tested, we tested a ton of compliance, compliance details in these programs, and to have one item show up is really, not much of, as from our perspective, not much of a concern. It's, it's almost unheard of to not see something when we're doing that much additional testing. So not much to report there. When it comes to legal compliance, we also do some testing as required by the OSA. There's a bunch of checklists that we have to run through to look at various legal compliance items for the school district. An easy one to, that's required by legal statute is collateral for any cash funds that the school has. We did note one legal compliance item this year. It was the submission of the county indebtedness report. It's required to be filed to the county by February 1st, and I believe it was filed on February 4th. So just one item to note there. Moving on. Enrollment for the year, I won't touch too much on this. I know you guys have done a lot of looking at enrollment with all the coronavirus going on and looking at what your enrollment's going to be. So just kind of a high level, as you can see, your adjusted average daily membership for the year came in at 6,858.86. I believe that's down just about 54 ADMs from the prior year. When we're looking at the school's general fund fund balance, specifically the unassigned fund balance, that's the piece programmatically, there's decisions to be made about where those funds can be used. And we're looking at the unassigned fund balance. It increased about almost 2.6 million during the year to end at 10.6 million as of June 30th, 2021. And when we're looking at overall fund balance for the general fund, it increased about 6.5, between 6.5 and 6.6 million during the year to have a general fund total fund balance of just over 20 million for the year. That unassigned portion, we always kind of look at that as a comparison to your yearly expenditures, and that represents about, so that 10.6 million represents about 10.11% of your general fund expenditures. That's up from about 7.8 in the prior year. The district's policy is to maintain about 6%, so you're a little bit above what the policy requires for the school district. When we're looking at the budget to actual for the general fund, looking specifically at the revenues first, it looks like the general fund revenues came in about 1.2 million higher than the final budget amount, or 1.14%. And when we're looking at a $111 million revenue budget, that is, we would consider very close and a very good, budget. We're looking at the expenditures. They came in just under budget, about 2.2 million for the year, or 2.10%. And that, again, very, very close when you're considering the size of the budget. So everything looks good there. Then moving on, I'll quickly glance over the statement of net position. This is just showing the comparison between the fund level and the full accrual financial statements. It's including some of the long-term assets and liabilities. So I'll quickly go through those and move on to page, I think the bottom of the page is 6, looking again at just the general fund financial position. As you can see there, this is kind of just a quick summary of your revenues and expenditures, and as you can see, fund balance increased by that $6,567,000 for the year, showing an ending fund balance of $20 million, just over $20 million. And there also is a little bit of breakdown for your fund balances. That non-spendable piece of your fund balance is truly non-spendable. That's prepaid items and inventory. That restricted fund balance, those are amounts that the legislature is providing, but there are strings attached. One example is gifted and talented. The district is allocated a portion of gifted and talented, and then the district spends that portion and any additional unassigned fund balance to support those programs as well. So, but again, as you can see there, we have the unassigned fund balance as a portion of expenditures, and again, it's showing up at 10.11% for the year, up from about 7.8 in the prior year. This next page is just a couple of graphs just to put some visualization, to the trends over the last couple of years, and it's looking at that unassigned fund balance compared to expenditures, and then a total fund balance as compared to expenditures there. And then two, we like to show that general fund unassigned fund balance as compared to your ADM. So just some tables to represent, give you a little bit of a visual perspective of the trends over the last couple of years. I think on the bottom of page 8 here, it shows students served for aid. Again, just a quick breakdown of where your enrollment numbers are falling. Something to note, open enrollment open enrollment out versus open enrollment in. You can see this year's open enrollment in, saw a larger increase in that open enrollment out, which is good to see. So. Then I'll move on to page 10. We're looking at the general fund revenues by source. This just gives you a breakdown of the different types of revenue that are funding the general fund, broken out between your local property taxes, the state sources, federal sources, and other revenue. A lot of times we just look to see that the proportionality for these funding sources are remaining consistent. Maybe the only thing to note this year is you'll see a jump in those federal sources just due to all that additional coronavirus aid funding that was provided this year. So you'll see that percentage of the federal sources increase a little bit. There was also a little bit of increase for the property taxes just due to the levy increase this year. This next slide shows the expenditures per student. Again, we just like to visualize that. And as you can see, the general fund for all expenditures came in at about $15,282 per student this year. That's up about $456 from the prior year. Page 12 here is showing the general fund expenditures, kind of broken down by the various programs where they're spent over the last 5 years. And as is common, the regular instruction is obviously going to be the highest, every year there. There's not much change between proportionality between the various funds. And then that bottom table is just showing the general fund expenditures by type, so salaries, employee benefits, things like that. And as you can see there, the actual expenditures were $2.2 million under budget for the year. Very common for us to see this year, just the salaries and employee benefits be a little bit under budget. Very common across districts just due to coronavirus and staffing challenges during this time of the year. Last couple things to touch on here. Food service fund, as you can see, this one, revenues came in, were about $254,000 or $255,000 above budget for the year, but as you can see, still have, greatly impacted by COVID-19. The expenditures were also about $345,000 above budget. And overall, there was fund balance decrease about $131,000 for the year. Not uncommon for us to see this, with all the challenges the food service fund has to deal with, with COVID and everything that's going on with that program. And then this bottom table shows the meals served, and as you can see, meals served increased slightly for the year overall compared to 2020, but all of the food service program ran through the summer food program this year. So as you can see, they're all listed in one column this year, or one category. Next is the Community Service Fund. This is all the fee-based programs, things of that sort. And this year, this is another fund that had a lot of challenges due to COVID-19, and it was not uncommon for us to see, fund balance decreases this year in a lot of these programs. But as you can see here, we actually saw an increase in revenues over expenditures of about $248,000. So really, really great to see that, all the hard work that went in to pivot those programs and see a successful outcome there. This Appendix B is just showing expenditures per enrollment, kind of as a comparison across the 7 metro area. And as you can see, the district's a little bit higher than the 7 metro average, but that doesn't really tell the whole story. You really need to look into where those dollars are being spent at. So as you can see, there's additional expenditures in those regular instructions, of vocational instructions, and those types of programs. So even though overall things are higher, there's also some really positive signs in there as well. Just seeing that expenditures per student is higher for those programs as well. So just wanted to provide that for your comparison. Moving on to Appendix C. This is just providing some information for your knowledge for legislative activity. Really, the main point here is just that first item, the general fund general education revenue formula allowance was increased by 2.45%, $161 per pupil unit to $6,728 for fiscal year 22, and then will increase by another 2% in 2023. So just want to draw your attention to that. And that is the main point for the legislative activity. Appendix D is just providing some information on upcoming accounting standards. Obviously, the big one coming down the pipe is GASB 87, which is related to leases. There might be some additional leases that previously qualified as operating leases that may now qualify as capital leases and will be presented in the financial statements. We've have already talked to the finance department, and I think they have a good grasp of everything there. Just wanted to make sure everyone is well aware that this is coming down the line, just to make sure that the implementation of it goes smoothly. It could potentially be a lot of work, but as long as you get out ahead of it, everything should be fine there. And then last is just our Appendix E, which is our formal required communication. If there was we have some required communications as far as if there was any difficulties during the audit, any disagreements with management, any uncorrected misstatements, things of that nature. And I'm happy to report there's nothing to report there. So you can read through these reports, but everything in there is just typical boilerplate language, nothing to report there. So, and that should conclude the executive audit summary. I would be glad to take any questions if anyone has anything.
Thank you very much. I think this speaks volumes about the work of Director Chapanduka and the entire business office. Of course, we always really appreciate Clifton Larson Allen's assistance with this process every year as well, and thank you for the summary. Any questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Sure, Chair Bouchard.
Director Adams.
I don't know which one of you can answer this, but under the single audit, I always look for exceptions, and suspension and debarment. Could you explain what those are? What does that mean in common language?
Essentially, any entity that is under contract for these federal funds is required to be in good standing with the federal government. So there's just a check in place that to make sure that they are in that good standing for
Okay.
those.
So in some instance, apparently, we did not check to see if a vendor
I think
was-
the check was done and there was communication there. There's just some additional documentation required for that, and just because of the discussion with the contract, with the language in it, I believe that piece may have
Okay.
been lacking. So
Yeah, just to maybe add some context to that. So we use some of the ESSA dollars to actually fund equipment in food services, and that required us to actually get prior approval from MDE. So the company we bought this piece of equipment from ended up getting acquired by another company. So it became so difficult for us to actually go back to them. Now they are saying, go to our new parent company, because they are telling us we can't do anything else apart from just referring you to them. And we try to get to that new company which owns this vendor, and they've kind of been giving us runarounds.
Okay, all right. This GASB 87, now this goes into effect when?
it will go into effect next year for next year's
Okay.
audit.
And Terrell, do we have any leases that fall under that definition of operating leases?
Yes, we do. And again, most of those leases in the past were actually considered to be more operating expenditures. Now we have to capitalize them. So a good example is we have a lease for some of the buses we own as a district, so those will be impacted because now they are actually showing as part of the capitalized component.
Okay. And I see that you recommend that we acquire some technology solution to manage our leases. Is that?
That can be useful if there's a significant amount of leases.
Okay.
Generally, there can be a lot of work in the back end to maintain this. But if there's not it kind of depends on the assessment of how many potential leases are out there. We're just recommending that just to look into it just in case there's a lot of leases available. If there isn't really a lot that is going to be impacted by GASB 87, then it's not something that would be necessary.
Use good old Excel.
Yeah.
And I see you identify, if we've got more than 10 to 20 identified leases, that would be appropriate.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Other board member comments or questions? I'm looking at page 6, our financial position, and thinking about all of the hard collective work to structurally balance our budget. And this is what it was all for, right? When we look at really the progress here over the past 3 years, looking at that growth in the unassigned fund balance, definitely moving in the right direction. And so this is something I'll highlight as well during the meeting, because I think it's really important for our community to see this and to understand, that really robust process results in audit reports like this, right? So,
Absolutely.
so really, really proud of all of the work that your team did, Director Chapanduka, and guided us through as a board.
Thank you.
Another positive was the community ed budget. I remember,
Yeah.
do you remember that one update? It was like mid-2020 where things were so bleak, right? I mean, the impact of COVID was just really heavy on our community ed programs. And to see well, first of all, the innovation and the system decisions that had to be made, both in response and in anticipation of community needs during COVID, and the impact that that's had on the budget was just really impressive.
Yeah, I remember having a briefing with legislators and pleading with them to do something to bring our community ed budget into alignment, and it fell on deaf ears. So it's good that we were able to stabilize it on our own.
Absolutely. Any other board member questions or comments? Well, thank you very much. Dr. Mary Puri Reid, did you have anything to add?
I also want to echo my thanks and gratitude to the team. I see Jason is on the call. Do you have other teammates who are
Oh, yes.
in the virtual space, Torero?
It's just Jason. But
Okay.
I'm sure they're also watching from home.
They're
so-
watching, okay. Okay,
Yeah, and I think I tried by all means to, I tried to mention each
Oh, there he
individual
is.
the person who actually participated in the audit. If I missed anybody, no pun intended, I'm sorry, but I think like pretty much district-wide, I mean, an audit touches all points in the
Yes.
district.
Yeah, we all have to cooperate, and Jason just turned his camera on. So Jason, we wanted to all thank you personally. I guess we're not exactly in person with you, but thanks to you, Jason, and to the whole team for all of your efforts. Our board is very pleased with the report, and we're thankful for all of the hours and the time and the careful diligence. Thank you. Please pass the message to your team.
I will. I just want to make sure I mention that, as Torero did, my team did an outstanding job. And as well as all departments in the district, anytime we needed something, they did an outstanding job. So I'd just like to thank them and definitely to thank Torero for his leadership.
All right.
Thank you for sharing that. And Lance, how many people on your team participated in this process?
There were 6 of us on the audit team, so
Okay.
Wow.
Significant hours. Well, thanks to you and your team as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
yep, thank you.
Thank you both. Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
move to our next agenda item, which is our winter board retreat planning. So the last time we did a board retreat was in August, and we spent the afternoon together at Hopkins High School. It was the beginning of our goal-setting process as a board. We heard updates from cabinet. We kind of did a level set on what the conversation was going to be around the learning parameters redesign, the conversation that we just completed this stage of and voted on at the last meeting. And we did a restorative circle that was a really great opportunity to experience this format that's being used throughout the district to build culture, to build rapport, and then used, as a format when there is conflict and things that need to be resolved. So it was a positive experience, and an experience that I would like our new board members to be able to have with us as we get to know each other as leaders, understand more about what drives us, why we want to be a part of this work. And then, of course, looking to our work January through June, and maybe if the board's interested, engaging in some professional development around topics that we just think that we need a little bit of support on. So that's kind of the context for the conversation. One logistical note is that we haven't yet found a date that works for everybody. And I think this just means that we have very busy people on our board and joining our board. So Elise sent out a second survey. So thank you all. You all filled out the first survey to try to find a date. We weren't able to find one that worked for everybody. So please fill out the second survey. And we're looking at very late January, like the 31st is the first date that's suggested, and then into February. I'm not necessarily disappointed about this. I think it gives us time, we'll be able to connect at the MSBA conference with our new board members. It gives our new board members some time to kind of settle into the routine, and then we'll find a time to come together in late January or February. So the purpose of this conversation is just to learn more about what you might be interested in doing at the retreat. I'll talk more about this in my board report, but had a great meeting with Jason and Rachel, our new board members, and learned more about what they'd like to do during the retreat. So I have some of that information, but wanted to hear from you as well so that Rhoda and I can start to work together to plan a really great afternoon or morning, whenever we can find a time that works for everybody.
We're looking at about a half-day experience?
Yeah, similar to what we did in August.
Okay. Well,
I did talk with Shannon, Vice Chair Andreessen, who, for our public who are listening, she's not with us this evening because she is participating in the District 287 Superintendent Search. She serves on the District 287 board and is there representing Hopkins and our priorities in that superintendent search this evening. So I did touch base with her before the workshop just to get an idea of what she might like to see during the retreat, and she likes the idea of doing a circle. I think last time when we did it, our time was cut a little bit short, and that's a me problem, so I will budget more time for the circle. So is that something that would be of interest?
sure.
Okay.
I think that would be. Another thing that I was thinking was that maybe we should review Reimagine Minnesota. Because our new board members are not familiar with that process, I don't believe, and for the results that came out of that whole process. So that might be a good, and I'm finding it was interesting. I'll talk about it in my board report, but I was at a meeting of AMSD last week, and I realized that I was at a table, and there were 5 of us, and only 2 of us had ever been a part of that whole process to develop Reimagine Minnesota. So I think it's something that needs to be reinforced on a periodic basis so that new people understand what it is.
Yeah, exactly, and all the work that went into it. I participated as a parent because it was long before I was on the board, and it was a really robust process,
Right.
Across the state. One idea might be to look at some of the Reimagine Minnesota recommendations that we have implemented in Hopkins. That could be an interesting framework for our new board members to see these are these state level recommendations, and here's how we've interpreted those or implemented those in Hopkins.
Right, and check off the ones we've completed.
You like a good checklist, right?
I don't think you're ever complete on any of those, but
Yeah, exactly.
at least you're in process.
Thank you. Are there any topics that the board is interested in having some more professional development on? This wouldn't necessarily all need to happen during the retreat, but these are, opportunities that we could layer in during workshops and that type of thing too.
I personally would, I don't know if it would really be considered professional development, but deeper dive from some people on restorative discipline. See if we can, I know that, I think you said it was Stephanie had, but, maybe have her talk to us a little bit, but also whether we can even have somebody from outside come in and talk to us a bit more about it too, that transition and in light of just some of the stuff happening at the high school, I would love to get my head wrapped around that more.
I think that's a great, timely idea, especially with the work that's happening in the monitoring committee. I'll also talk a bit more about this in my board report. Shannon and Nick and I met with representatives from the Legal Rights Center the other day, and they are a local legal nonprofit that does a lot of work around restorative practices and coming into communities and building capacity. So that might be an interesting resource that we could tap into for, if not at the retreat, for a workshop conversation too, just to learn more about what they've done. For me and my professional development, it's always really interesting to see how concepts have played out in other spaces too, and they would be able to give us more of that context. Like, here's a case study, like work that we did in this community, and here's what it looked like. I think that just can be really helpful, especially with highly conceptual things and frameworks, to see like, okay, how did this actually play out? What actually happened, right? So thank you. I think that's a great idea. There will also be snacks. I forgot to mention that part, but I know that's what you're all thinking right now, and so I just wanted to break the tension and just say that there will be snacks. Well, I think this gives us quite a bit to go on, especially for a half-day session, and then aspects that we don't cover during the retreat, we can always chunk into workshop discussions too. So if you feel good about it, I feel good about moving forward with a plan, and then once we have that date solidified, we can send out more concrete details.
So Elise sent out another request for dates.
Yes.
I don't know if I got that or if I saw it.
I also linked it to the workshop agenda, if that makes it a little bit easier to find.
Oh, okay.
Oh, thank you.
It'll pop right up for you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, that's all I had on that agenda item, so I think we can end the workshop. And for the Truth in Taxation hearing, board members will sit out in the audience with our community members who join us. And so let's plan to be here to greet people who are coming in around 5 minutes to 6. Thank you very much.
All right. Put them in the right slots to send them to the right place.
I don't know if it's even necessary.
Just go back and forth, probably.
Okay.
I just go back and forth. What I'd like to do though is change my view on the meat, so I can really see.
So this is on for, yeah. So they can come up in front of, the board's gonna be here, or they can talk like this if they want to talk to you.
Oh, I know. Somehow that, big surprise.
Somehow you're like, I'm not sure it's good.
I'm not sure.
He has to turn it on.
Oh, he does. Steve.
Yeah, I think he intentionally, oh, okay. Yes.
Turn it on from inside.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, how do I unmute it? Oh, you got it. Okay, good. We'll get started. Welcome to our Truth and Taxation hearing for the Hopkins School Board. We are happy to have community members with us tonight in the audience and then also joining us via the YouTube live stream. And I will turn it over to our Director of Business Services, Turo Chapanduga.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Good evening, board members. Good evening, community members and the public at large. This is a presentation we are required to do by Minnesota laws. We are required to have a public hearing for tax payable in 2022. So Minnesota law requires a public meeting between November 25th and December 28th at 6 p.m. or later. This may be part of the regular scheduled meeting, but we decided to actually do this before our regular meeting to allow enough time for public hearing as well as comments. After this presentation, we'll have the board meeting where we can actually have the board deliberate on the final levy for pay 2022. During this presentation, I'll also present the current year budget as well as the property tax levy. So as part of our hearing agenda, I'll give some background information on school funding, district's budget. I'll talk about the district's proposed tax levy for taxes payable in 2022 and some of the increases and decreases in our numbers. And then we'll give an opportunity for public comments and responses. Minnesota legislation sets funding for Minnesota public school districts. According to Article 13 of the Minnesota Constitution, miscellaneous subjects, Section 1, uniform systems of public schools. The stability of a Republican form of government depends mainly upon the intelligence of the people. It is the duty of the legislature to establish a general and uniform system of public schools. The legislature shall make sure provisions by taxation or otherwise as will secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. As a result, funding is highly regulated. State sets formulas which determine revenue, and most revenue is based on specified amounts per pupil. Tax policy for local schools is also set at local level as well as the state level. The state sets maximum authorized property tax levy. Districts can levy less, but not more than any amount authorized by the state, unless approved by voters in November. The state also authorizes school board to submit referendums for operating and capital needs to voters for approval. And the last time the district did this was in November of 2017. Since the state set the basic general education formula, this formula has actually have its challenges because it lacks inflation. Since 2002, 2003, the state's general education revenue formula has not kept pace with inflation. For fiscal year 2021-22, an increase of 2.45% or $161 over the previous year was approved. For fiscal year 22-23, an increase of 2% or $135 over the current year was approved. The pupil allowance for fiscal year 22-23 of $6,863 would need to increase by another $598 or 8.7% to have kept pace with inflation since fiscal year 2002-2003. So for fiscal year 21, our per pupil formula allowance was $6,567. For fiscal year 22, due to the 2.45% increase, our per pupil formula is $6,728. And for fiscal year 23, due to the additional 2% increase, will be $6,863. As you can see on the graph in this presentation, inflation has not really been factored into the formula. So as you can see from my graph here, the solid blue line actually shows the adjusted for pupil weight change, including the consumer price index inflation. And the dotted orange line is the formula allowance is adjusted to pupil weight change. So as I said in my previous slide, for us to keep pace with inflation, the district will need at least $598 additional dollars on top of what we are actually getting. We've been getting over the years a 1% to 2% increase, which has not really been meeting the inflationary components as defined by CPI. One of the challenges we have as a school district, not just Hopkins School District, but across the state and across the nation, is underfunding of special education. Minnesota Department of Education reports fiscal year 2020 costs of providing special education programs were underfunded statewide by $673 million. MDE estimates by fiscal year 2025, costs of providing special education statewide will be underfunded by $806 million. Underfunding of special education costs require a transfer from regular programs resources to support an underfunded program mandated by the state and federal laws. Primary options to bridge special education funding gap are to cut regular programs, budgets, or increase referendum revenue. Most districts have done both. And at Hopkins, we are actually cross-subsidizing special education by 40%, meaning that any funds which would have benefited the regular programs are now diverted to meet state mandates as required by either federal law or state law. At the same time, changes in tax levy does not determine change in budget. Tax levy is based on main state-determined formulas plus voter-approved referendums. Some increases in tax levies are revenue neutral and offset by reductions in state aid. Expenditure budget is limited by state revenue formulas, voter-approved levies, and fund balance. An increase in school taxes does not correlate to an equal increase in budgets. School district levy cycle differs from the city count levy cycle. The city count budget is determined on a calendar year, meaning that 2022 taxes paid provide revenue for 2022 calendar year budget. For school districts, our budget year begins in July 1st, and coincide with the school year. So 2022 taxes provide revenue for 22-23 school fiscal year, and that budget will be adopted in June of 2022. Because approval of school district budget lags certification of tax levy by 6 months, state require only current year budget information to be presented at this hearing. Fiscal year 22-23 budget will be adopted by school board in June of 2022. All school district budgets are divided into separate funds based on purpose of revenue as required by law. Hopkins Public School District's funds include our general fund, of which a majority of the levy actually resides, includes food services, which is proprietary, and those funds are actually generated by sale of meals or other claims we get from the state or federal government. Community services, which is also a proprietary fund, which is mostly funded by service paid by the community. Building construction, which is funded by funds which are either generated through the levy, through the long-term facility maintenance, or bonded through the sale of bonds for construction in our buildings. Debt service, which is a fund which is actually residing within the levy to pay for any of the capital projects which are funded out of bond funds. Internal service include our self-health insurance fund as well as our severance fund, our other post-employment benefits trust, which is part of our pensions, and other post-employment debt service fund. So these are some of the different categories of funding which are streaming into our school district. So on the revenue and expenditure, if I factor in all the different funds I just mentioned in the previous slide, the total funds to the district amount to about 165,218,242. And those are the funds we are actually using from our general fund perspective to food services, construction, debt service, and I will actually show in my next slide how that is broken down. So out of the 165,218,242 general fund accounts for 69%, which is about 113.9 million. Food services account for 2.3% or $3.8 million. Community services account for 4.8% or $7.9 million. Building construction accounts for 13.1 or $21.6 million. Debt service account for 10.8% or $17.7 million. And we just paid off our OPEB debt. Out of the general fund revenue, which amounts to about $113.9 million, 60% of that is provided through the state, through the general education aid, and that amounts to about $67.9 million, or close to $68 million. 4.1% of that is federal sources through grants and other additional supplementary funds we get from the federal government, which amounts to about $4.6 million. 41.3 or 36.3% comes from the local property taxes, which is part of the levy and the hearing we are having here today, and about minimal 1% comes from other sources as we generate funds for the district. General fund expenditures by programs. So our regular instruction, which is about $48 million or 42.1%, actually goes to cover regular instruction. 0.8% or $863,000 cover vocational education instruction. 14.7% or $16.7 million cover special education instruction. where we cross-subsidize this fund by about 40%. 6.7% or $7.6 million covers instructional support services. 9% or $10.2 million covers pupil support services. 12.1% or $13.7 million covers sites and buildings. 1.4% or $1.6 million cover other expenditures. 5.5% or $6.2 million cover administration, both in the building and at central office. 7.7% or $8.7 million cover district support services, which gives us a total of that $130,927,364. Almost 80% of our expenditures are salaries and benefits. Since we are more human intensive, 55.3% covers our salaries, or $63 million. 21.5% or $24.5 million covers our employee benefits. 15.3% or $17.3 million covers our purchase services, which include contracts within our transportation and some of the components we have to spend on operations. 2.3% or $2.5 million covers supplies and material. 4.2% or $4.8 million cover capital expenditures. 1.4% or $1.6 million cover other miscellaneous expenditures. So that gives a breakdown of how those dollars are being spent from an object costing perspective. So the next couple of slides will be presenting on the payable 2022 property tax, how it's determined. We'll do some comparison between 2021 and 2022 levies and some of the reasons behind the changes you will see and how it's impacting taxpayers. Every owner of taxable property pays property tax to various taxing jurisdictions, whether at county level, city, township, school district, special district in which property is located. Each taxing jurisdiction sets on tax levy, often based on limits in state law. County sends bills, collects taxes from property owners, and distributes funds back to other taxing jurisdictions. This is just a sample of which maybe most of you have already received. A sample of a parcel-specific notice which is mailed by the county between November 11th and November 24th with information on the impact of proposed 2022 levy. Each school district may levy taxes in 40 different categories. Maximum levy amounts for each category are set by state law and are approved by the voters. Minnesota Department of Education calculates levy maximums for each school district. For school district property taxes, there are a number of steps which are actually followed. One at the city level, at the board level, at the county level. So the first step is the city and the county assessor determining the estimates of each market value for each parcel of property in the county. Legislature sets formulas for tax capacity. For example, homestead residential property tax capacity is 1%, of the first 500,000 and an additional 1.25% of any value over $500,000. From there, the count auditor calculates tax capacity for each parcel of property in count and as well as the total tax capacity of each school district. Legislature sets formulas which determine school district levy limits. These are maximum amounts of taxes school districts can levy in every category. Minnesota Department of Education calculates detailed levy limits for each school district based on formulas approved by legislature, as I mentioned in the previous step. And these limits tell district exact amounts that can be levied in every category. The school board adopts a proposed levy in September based on limits set in Step 5 as determined by Minnesota Department of Education. And after the public hearing, which we are doing right now, the board will adopt a final levy, and that final levy will be certified, and that's what the count will use for collecting or making an additional adjustment to property taxes. So in September, we brought to the board on September 14th a proposed levy, which we actually recommended the board to approve at that point in time at maximum. And then in mid-November, as I mentioned previously, the count did send some proposed tax statements to property owners. And after this public hearing, the board will vote on the levy certification. And this will actually finalize the whole entire process of levy for payable 2022. As an overview for the proposed tax levy payable in 2022, our proposed property tax levy for 22 is an increase from 2021 of $1,278,126, or 2.2%. And I'll explain some of the reasons why we actually have a 2.2% increase or $1.2 million increase to our property taxes in comparison to the previous year. There are a number of components which are actually determined by the value of properties in our community. So, for example, our voter-approved capital projects levy, which is the technology referendum, which was approved in November of 2017. There's a change increase of about $764,000. And that change is actually determined by just the increase in property basis in our community. So as property tax basis increases, some of our levy components also increases, meaning that there's an increase in collection for the district. So for example, with the capital projects levy, this is used to support technology costs in the district. We are now a one-on-one district. And this money and these resources do help with our vision when it comes to technology. Some of the increases are also attributed to increases in district are also attributed to our general and debt service funds. Our general fund long-term facilities maintenance increased by about $1.3 million. At the same time, our debt service voter-approved debt service also decreased by about $4.4 million, meaning that shift back and forth between some of the increases and decreases kind of offset each other. We also had the debt service fund, LTFM, which increased by about $3.5 million. So at the end, if you look at the net, you are going to find out that our debt service did decrease slightly. And this debt service is used to fund our facilities maintenance and some of it require us making bond payments for the debt which was issued to actually construct some of our buildings or maintain some of our buildings or renovate some of our buildings. So those are some of the categories where we have seen a slight increase. For the most part, most of the categories within our levy have been flat. So there are many factors which can cause the tax bill for an individual property to increase or decrease from year to year. This may include changes in value of individual property, changes in total value of all property in the district, increases or decreases in levy amounts caused by changes in state funding formulas, local needs and costs, voter-approved referendums, and other factors. So the following slides I'm going to show are just examples on the impact of property tax between 2019 to 2022. And these examples just include the district portion of the taxes only. It doesn't include the county and other entities. And the examples are based on an assumption of a 14.1 increase in property value over those 4 years. So a good example would be, for example, a property which was valued at $131,454 in 2019. At that point in time, the actual taxes payable in 2019 was about $480. And then that value increased over time to where in fiscal year 2022 is valued at about $150,000. And estimated taxes being $545. So if you look from 2019 to 2022, the total increase of that property is about $65. And then if you do a comparison between 21 and 2022, you see that the increase is $17. And then the list goes on. If you factor in, the higher valued properties or commercial properties, you can make a determination that some of them are actually decreasing in as far as the liability for property taxes. The next graph also shows the impact on a taxpayer on a property valued at $250,000. Between 2019, the property tax for that parcel of land was $867, and then estimated 2022 will be $974, which is an increase of about $107. And then if you do comparison between 2021 and 2022, you will see that the increase is about $17. Same with the $500,000 property, which was actually assessed $1,828 in 2019, estimated based on a slight increase in property taxes will be about $2,027. And the same applies to commercial property. You can actually see that with commercial property, you can see a slight decrease in the assessment based on the assumption of a 14.1 increase in net tax capacity. Minnesota also provides, and this is just for informational purposes, Minnesota also provides credit refunds for homesteads. And the Homestead Credit Refund has been in existence since the 1970s. It is available each year to owners of homestead properties. Annual income must be approximately $116,180 or less. And the refund is based on a sliding scale on income and total property taxes. The maximum refund for homeowners who qualify for the Homestead Credit refund is $2,840, and it's also available to renters. If you qualify for this credit, you can actually go to the Minnesota Revenue Department and complete state tax form M1PR, and the state will be processing those refunds. There are also other special property tax refunds. The Minnesota Special Property Tax Refund, which is available each year to owners of homestead properties with a gross tax increase of at least 12% and $100 over prior year. And this is mostly helpful in a year where we have a referendum. And the refund for this is 60% of amount by which tax increase exceeds greater of 12% or $100 up to a maximum of $1,000. And there's no income limit for this. Again, if you qualify for that, you can go to the Minnesota Department of Revenue and complete the state tax form M1PR. There's also tax deferrals available for senior citizens. This allows people aged 65 and older with household income of $60,000 or less to defer a portion of property tax on their homes. They must have lived in the home and homestead for the last 15 years. It limits maximum amount of property tax paid to 3% of household income. Additional taxes are also deferred and not forgiven. It also provides predictability. The amount of tax paid will not change while participating in the program. With that said, the next step will be for the board to accept the public comments on the proposed levy, and then the board will have to certify that levy. So the total proposed levy for the district amounts to $59,704,442. Our previous proposed levy was $58,426,316, which is that $1.2 million increase of the 2.2%. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Chapanduka. So we have two community members here to give public comment this evening. When you come up to give your comments, you may speak for 3 minutes. You don't have to keep track of time. I will time for you and let you know. And a reminder that personal attacks by anyone addressing the school board will not be tolerated, and persistence in such remarks by an individual or otherwise disruptive behavior shall terminate that person's privilege to address the school board. And with that, I will call forward Ari Lenz.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to come tonight and I wanted to just say, I did a quick calculation based off of what I pay for my preschooler to attend preschool here. And I would be owing you significantly more money than this if I had to pay for the cost of their education. And that doesn't include the societal benefits of preparing our workforce that you guys are doing, and the stability of providing care for youth that would otherwise, as we saw with COVID, not have places to go and disrupt people being able to work. So I just wanted to say thank you. Feel free to text me this amount, and I wish it was more. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call forward Vic Harvath.
I'm representing affordable housing here in Hopkins mainly. This would be on 11th Avenue between 11th and 9th Avenue between 7th and Cemetery, whatever it is, road out there. There's approximately between 950 and 1,000 units in there. The majority of them are the majority. Every one of them are below the affordable housing units. Any kind of increase in taxes, I manage several units there, and my son owns one unit. As a matter of fact, he owns his, and his tax in the school board went up 10%. On the people that are affordable housing, let me give you a little bit of background. I've got one person that works 13 hours, 5 days a week, just to keep going with one student. I have another one with two younger students, and she works anywhere from 6 to 7 days a week just to keep going. They have a hard time making their payments. And when we look at what is happening here, just if I look at the local levies here, it went up 22 4/10% just on the school board. Homeowners, or those that I manage for, have to raise the taxes, period. They don't take it out of their pockets. Not only that, the assessment at the boards is also going up because of everything that's going on. Gas, electric, and all of those things that everybody's facing. But I'm telling you what's happening to these people that are in that, we think, well, who's going to affect that? I live in Golden Valley. Meadowbrook is our school there. My wife and I can basically say that we can afford it. But I'm still working. I'm 81 years old, and I'm still working. If I wasn't doing that, it probably wouldn't. But the main thing I'm talking about is people that are in the affordable housing, that they can't make it, and they look at these kinds of taxes, and they're going to pay them because I know it, they have to go up. And so all I can say to you that are on the school board and what you do, you need to take into consideration the people that are in that bracket that are being taxed high. And I know it's not only your responsibility, it's the state that really is the one that puts the burden out there. But we need to pass it on to them too, so that they make the stuff for the people that are in that lower bracket that are working their heads off just to keep ahead. And so that's why I'm trying to speak up for many of those people. Thanks.
Thank you. I only received 2 public comment cards. Are there any other public comment cards or community members wishing to speak? Thank you. This ends our Truth in Taxation hearing. Our meeting of the Hopkins School Board will begin at 7 p.m. If you are watching on the YouTube live stream, stay right here. We'll be back in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
creature of habit, are you, Parker?
This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7 p.m. I'd like to welcome our community members who have joined us here at Eisenhower, as well as our community members who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. It is wonderful to be in community with you all this evening. Before the meeting, we had our Truth and Taxation hearing, and grateful to our community members who came and gave us input during that process as well. Our first agenda item is open agenda, and this is typically the time when we would hear public comment. We've received no public comment voicemails or public comment cards. And we'll start with our student board representatives report. I understand we have a collaborative report this evening, so I will turn it over to Parker and Grace.
All right, so I am Grace. I'm the 10th grade sophomore representative from Hopkins High School. And I first wanted to talk to you guys about a little update on sports. The Hopkins girls swim and dive team has placed overall second at sectionals, which unfortunately sent them home after a very long and proud season. However, Harper Bushman, Janessa Reglos, and Annabelle Spears all went to state. Harper went for the 100 fly event, and Janessa and Annabelle went for diving. Boys varsity hockey has had a home game tonight that started 2 minutes ago at 7, and they play against Southwest Christian High School. And then, like many Hopkins sports, the boys have been dressing to impress. This includes nice pants, dress shirts, and for many teams, team jackets or varsity lettermans.
Just love Spirit Days. Both our Alpine and Nordic skiers are just getting out on snow like I was a couple hours ago. I know that on the Nordic team this year we have super good membership in the order of 70 to 80 people. And from what I've heard, downhill skiing has grown a lot in the last couple of years too. So super exciting.
And then a quick update on clubs. The TAMP Action Club, as well as the Girls United Hopkins High School programs, went very well. They had a period product event in which they had donation centers and like donation events. I want to say probably a month and a half ago to 2 months ago, where they collected various period products and sanitary items to be put in the girls' bathrooms and non-binary bathrooms at the high school. And I'm bringing this up now because yesterday we officially ran out, but there should be more coming soon.
On a more serious note, last week we had a reset at the high school. So there's been a crackdown on people being late to class and stricter control of hallways. You now really need a pass to be out in the halls. And they're working relatively well. There are a lot fewer people out in the halls during class disrupting learning. But at the same time, things still aren't going ideally. Kids are showing up late to class, albeit a little sooner than before. Because now after the first 5 minutes, you have to get a pass to enter class, or you have to go to the cafeteria to get one, where you'll receive targeted support.
And the reason we're bringing this up is because the student body generally feels that there needs to be some adjustments made to this. There were 2 other fights today during passing time between 3rd and 4th block, and scholars feel as though there are too many announcements during the day about these.
Not about the fights, to clarify.
Yeah, sorry about that, about the passing time and passes in the hallways and things like that. The general consensus is that they drag on, and scholars as well as teachers start to ignore them after a while, so it's doing more harm than good. As well as things being said online about Hopkins High School that are not really in line with the positive view that we'd like to have. students are becoming increasingly more aware of it, and it's negatively impacting their schoolwork and different things like that. Then the Restorative Circles with Principal Ballard have also been a part of the reset. And they've been going well as far as I'm aware, although I know they've been a little lackluster in attendance. The issue is that they're generally very poorly attended, this coming from the ones that we've had so far this year, as well as the one with the Prior Lake video. That being said, the voices we're hearing at those circles tend to be ones that have already been shared in different formats, whether that be, you know, online or morning announcements or different things like that. So it's generally, we find that the kids that really need to attend those meetings or should be seeking out for support really aren't doing that as much as we would like to. So yeah.
Overall good, but there's some concern that some aspects of the reset aren't quite connecting the way they need to be.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the nuance that you both brought to this, right? Because we have to stay in this space of nuance and collective problem solving to get through this time. And so part of that is understanding which parts are working and which parts we need to continue to work on, right? And so you're helping the board kind of, and our larger community kind of understand from your perspective as students where we're at in that process. Questions or comments from board members?
Chair Bouchard?
Yes, Director Cool.
I would love to understand just a little bit more when you talk about the daily announcements that happen and how they kind of drag on. What type of details are they giving? More about the restorative circles, or what exactly is kind of getting drowned out?
That's a super good question. They're often very repetitive. So they start out slightly unscripted and they get more scripted. And so you get reminded about, you need to have a pass in the hall twice, for example.
Okay.
And the parts that are scripted can feel sort of stiff and are difficult to listen to when there are like 5 of them in a row. And that's why both scholars and teachers kind of zone them out sometimes. And they come an awkward amount of time into second block, which makes them interrupt teachers all the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Other questions or comments?
Just regarding the passes, I was curious, do they have separate colored passes? Because I remember that's what they did when I was working at the media center. For the students who are late.
Yeah, if you enter the building late, you get a yellow slip where the passes are normally this sort of gold color, and they just look different. The passes, I'm not sure. I think they give you a gold pass if you're coming from the support, and the yellow passes, thank you. The superintendent is nodding. Yes, that's correct. And the gold passes signify that it's unexcused, or the gold passes signify that it's excused, the yellow passes signify that it's not.
So does it get confusing just regarding the passes and?
I cannot speak as somebody who has to enforce that, so like I can't speak to that. Grace, do you have anything to say?
I know I personally haven't been in this position where I've needed to go and get a different pass. But from what I've seen and kind of some of the feedback that I've heard, it's not so much as confusing as it is time consuming. Because if you're going to get a pass and then you're, talking to counselors and various people about your schoolwork, you're still not in class where you need to be. So that's kind of the main issue that people have with the passes.
That's true. I've heard that concern from both scholars and teachers, that students are missing too much class time. And I think it would be nice if the administration could, sort of take a position on that and say, yeah, we agree with you, let's do this differently, or reinforce what we're doing and say, this is why we're doing this.
Yeah, that helps so much, because I remember when I was there, it would get confusing. Every new term, we had new colored passes, and sometimes yeah, and then sometimes we didn't know which passes we needed to use. So it was it's silly, but it did get kind of confusing after a while, so, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, no, I'm not aware of that kind of like past confusion for our teachers and stuff.
I had a question about the restorative circles that you mentioned. So it sounds like Principal Ballard hosts those, and then those are a space for scholars to come together to discuss specific topics. Is that right?
Yeah, normally they're sent out either, like, the topics are sent out either, like, email-wise, or I believe sometimes they're on, like, those morning announcements. And I don't know the exact details about it. I believe they're on Fridays.
They're often on Fridays, and there is an issue with that, which is that puts it during scholars' lunch times.
Yeah, so the idea is that they would, like, go to the cafeteria, get their lunch tray, and then go into a separate room where the, like, circles are being held. But I know that was kind of awkward or confusing for scholars at the start, just because they were wondering, like, if I go to the circle, am I going to get lunch and different things like that. I believe it's been clarified since for them, but I know that there's still a lacking of attendance, and I believe that that's probably a decent part of it as well.
Thank you for helping me understand better. Are there other opportunities to participate in circles throughout the day, like in advisory or in any classes? Are circles being used in other spaces in the high school that you're aware of?
I know that this year we have done circles during first block. So that would be everywhere around the building during first block. Everybody drop what you're doing. We're doing a circle on this specific topic, which, for example, it was the fights that had happened the day before. And let's see, I think there have been days where it was, instead of skipping lunch, you do it during home base, which would be on Monday instead of Friday. But I think the administration, as far as I can tell, has been moving towards a model of having these on Fridays during lunch times, opportunity hours.
Thank you very much. Other board member comments or questions for our fabulous student board reps? Thank you. Really appreciate it. And I like that collaborative approach that you used. That was very cool. Next, we'll move to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Perry Reid.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and good evening, board members, colleagues, and community members. And thanks also to our student board reps. I also love hearing your reports and your really great insights about what's working and not working. I think one of the things I'm reminded of is when students and staff are planning together for what that next step needs to be for a school, the ideas are really, really good. So this reset plan that we put together, we did it during a distance learning day, and we did not have scholars present, and I think that we're planning on some planning time over winter break. And so I know Principal Ballard is going to put an invitation out to scholars to think about working with staff during winter break to do the tweaks and adjustments that you talked about are needed. So I look forward to just thinking creatively about ways for students and staff to work together, because the ideas that you bring to the table are always really interesting and valuable. So thanks for providing yet another example of great ideas. So for the superintendent report, It really is that time of year when a myriad of things come together in our classrooms and schools, including new revelations in student learning, teachers deepening their bonds with their students and with their colleagues, families finally feeling the rhythm of school, which I think is extra comforting during this year when the pandemic just continues to go on and on. It's also a very stressful time of year for staff and students as we transition from fall to winter, as students experience more frequent transitions between school and holiday breaks, and also as staff are growing weary from the emotional and intellectual toll of teaching and supporting students who have a wide range of academic and social and emotional needs. So lots and lots of really rich and vibrant things happening in all of our classrooms, in all of our schools, and it is a challenging time of year, and I just want to sort of acknowledge that juxtaposition. There are 40 metropolitan superintendents who meet biweekly to discuss and problem solve our most complex and shared challenges. And in our conversations, we quickly discover that the 40 districts we serve all share challenges around staffing, supply chains, transportation, staff and student mental health, including dysregulated students who may be quick to resort to verbal and physical conflict at our secondary schools across the state. Also a note just to acknowledge that we are all painfully aware of the school shooting in Michigan. And here in Hopkins, I'm extremely grateful for our school leaders who take time to reflect on their student support measures and clear expectations for staff. As an example, our leaders at West Junior High sent an email to staff recently letting them know that the student assistance team, so SAT, we have a student assistance team in all of our schools, met after the Michigan incident to review their own crisis prevention and response structures, and the message to staff reminded staff to do 3 things. Number 1, take time to intently listen to students during circles, during community building activities, during academic time. Number 2, if staff see or hear something, say something, because we know that our troubled students or students who are experiencing turmoil in their lives for whatever reason are very good, very consistent about demonstrating signals of their struggle. So if we see something or hear something, we must say something. And number 3, if staff have questions about crisis response or other procedures, to contact administration right away. So this is just a great message of our leaders saying, okay, let's just check in. What are our procedures? How are we supporting students? And what do we need to communicate to staff so that we're all on the same page? And like our scholars shared earlier, since our reset beginning last Monday at our high school, we have had mostly very good days. Our district staff and school leaders are working creatively to support our teachers who are educating and loving our students regardless of the many obstacles that surface. So I want to just recognize all of our Hopkins staff during this time for what they're doing day in and day out for our students. And I do have just a brief slideshow here with some other information I did want to share. So here's our a picture of our scholars at Gatewood in their outdoor learning, studying trees. We had a successful vaccination clinic for the littles this past Friday. So over 500 shots for 5 to 11-year-olds and over 130 booster shots for adults. So it was a really successful evening. We do have a couple of registration opportunities coming up, Hopkins Public Schools, a general registration opportunity, and also a virtual EDU information session coming up. I also wanted to share a scholar spotlight. We have 3 students who recently participated in a Lego League robotics tournament. So these awesome scholars, Evelyn Cameron, Gavin Farrow, and Lucian Peer, are on a team called the Great Gatsbys. And they competed in a regional tournament where they were evaluated within 5 categories: robot design and build, robot programming, robot performance on a timed challenge mat, core values, and an innovation project. And after working for many months, the team's robot outperformed all other robots in their division, allowing them to win a Robot Performance Award. So that's really cool news for the Great Gatsbys. That's a cool name. Our department spotlight for this report this evening is our amazing Hopkins school counselors. So we do have school counselors in all of our schools in Hopkins, and we're very fortunate to have full-time academic counselors who also address social and emotional needs with students in our elementary schools. That is definitely a luxury here in Hopkins. So I just want to raise up our counselors this evening. They are wonderful people who are very, very busy meeting students' needs and also supporting staff in many ways. Here's a list of all of the work that they do. And, you know, especially during this difficult time, going on 2.5 years now, our counselors add tremendous value to our students, to our families, to our staff. So thank you, counselors, for all of the work that you do supporting students. And then finally, just a note that we do continue, as you know, as busy as things can get, we have to be strategic as well. We are continuing to focus on our 6 strategic goals. And so I did want to draw a focus to our culture goal. We recently met with all of our school leaders about, I think it's been 2-3 weeks now, and we talked about having an increased focus on wellness in every classroom across all of our schools, and on really partnering with our teachers to have wellness be something that everyone owns, right? Not just counselors and social workers, but wellness has to be incorporated into every classroom experience. And so we put together a goal statement that, despite ongoing conditions brought on by the pandemics, our students and staff will have positive and productive experiences that are a result of intentional, explicit, and consistent infusions of restorative practices that result in wellness being at the center of learning. So that's really something that we're trying to focus on. In fact, we had our building instructional leadership teams and principals identify practices or procedures or commitments that are not adding value at this time that teachers and staff should stop doing, so that we can create the space to focus more intently on wellness. So we came up with a start and stop list that we hope will be helpful to teachers and staff in our schools. So that's it for the report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry Reid. Questions or comments from board members?
Chair Bouchard,
Yes, Director Khan.
I was curious regarding paras. I know we were short in quite a few buildings. Are we working on that to increase the amount of paras we have to support our teachers?
Absolutely. We have an HR department hard at work with any posting requests that come through. Obviously, the staffing shortage across the state and the nation is real. And so we do everything we can to recruit and to work with our networks on identifying some people who would be great for those roles. Every district is looking for paraprofessionals right now, so the competition is fierce. And we often encounter applicants, candidates who have many offers on the table. right, Dr. Lightfoot? And they will come with, this, and this is the expectation for compensation, right? They already know what they'd like to earn, and as we all know, it is a position that is not always competitively paid, so, that's a factor that we have to think about as we engage in those intense recruitment efforts. So we're really looking for people who are attracted to our mission, who have some alignment between what they are personally seeking in an organization and what we're trying to build. But yes, we are trying our very best.
Thank you.
I love this idea of a start and stop list. I think as educators, we tend to just sort of like take on extra things constantly, and really the core of culture shift is, of course, like establishing these shared norms and values, but then also thinking about how our actions align to them or don't. And this idea of like, here, like, it's almost like permission, like you can just stop doing these things because they're not serving the culture that we're trying to build, right? And in their place, try these things that hopefully will bring more satisfaction and connection and wellness for staff as well. So I think this very clear messaging around like, yes, you can stop doing these things, and yes, we want you to start doing these things can be really helpful. So I really liked hearing about that. Other questions or comments before we move on? Well, thank you. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move to our treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. As is traditional, the first Treasurer's Report of the month reports on enrollment. And for December, in November, we had 9 additional students over our head count in October. And this month, we've got an increase of 9 over November. So we've got 18 additional students with us as of October 1st. This month, we had 10 additional secondary students with a net loss of 1 elementary student. So that kind of runs counter to how we've been spending our experience in our enrollment over the last few years. Typically, we lose secondary students during the school year as they move on to other endeavors, but this year we're gaining. So with those increases, we're at 217 students over revised projection and 283 over our original projection for this year, which is pretty extraordinary. I listened to NPR midday today, and the discussion was about enrollment loss in Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools. And if you're aware, St. Paul is closing schools because of loss of enrollment. And Minneapolis has not taken that step yet. But when I heard that, I felt very relieved and pleased that we are experiencing a growth in enrollment. The expenses of note this month were $51,314 for special circuit rerouting at Excelsior Boulevard and Shady Oak Road. That's for our internet connection, our optical cable. And it's come about as a result of the light rail construction that's going around in that area. And the county decided to make some improvements to Excelsior Boulevard, expanding the width of it. So that's going to cause us to reroute some of our circuits. But at the same time, we're going to upgrade them. So it's going to be a positive result. We spent $5,676 for security camera updates at multiple schools. And I won't tell you what schools and what entrances or exits. So, excuse me, so be aware as you enter those schools. Excuse me. Then $352,000, $547 for regular and special ed transportation for October, November. Yeah, and as a kind of a sign of the times, $1,978 for psychologists for 1 week to assist with the influx of students requiring mental health treatment. At our non-public schools, that doesn't include what we're spending on our own scholars at our schools, but this goes to show that what we're experiencing in our district is being experienced as well in private and parochial schools within our district. And then finally, $209 for real maple syrup for student nutrition from a local provider, not the high fructose corn syrup stuff. We use real maple syrup, so I was pleased to approve that expenditure. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $2,795,467.33 for the period November 16, 2021 through November 29, 2021.
I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move into new business. Our first agenda item is our district audit report for 2021, and I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reid.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. And I'm pleased to welcome Director Chapanduka to the table. And Michelle, is that you? Okay. Very good. I thought so, but you know,
I
with the
said the same
masks and all. So earlier we had Lance with us from Clifton Larson Allen, who helped Director Chapanduka present the audit report during our workshop. And so now we're in the board meeting, and we will provide our listening audience and community members with a description of the work that's been done to help us arrive to a very clean audit. So thankful to you, Michelle, and your team of 6 for all of the work. And we also very much appreciate Teruro's leadership with the help of Jason and the rest of the business services team. So I will invite you to begin the presentation, then we'll see if our board members have questions.
Anything to start?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Mary Reid. Good evening, Chair Bouchard. Good evening, respective board members, the community at large. Again, with me, as alluded by our superintendent, is Ms. Michelle Hoffman, principal at Clifton Larson and Associates, who is going to actually get more detailed analysis of our fiscals for fiscal year 21. I would like to thank our business office team, starting with our controller, Mr. Jason Stegman, our district accountant, Robbie Budensky, our revenue accountant, Beth Kulas-Volk, our payroll team, Kenneth Woodard and Jackie, our accounts payable specialist, Jackie Evangelista, our purchasing coordinator, Chris Boyce, our marvelous coordinator of everything, Alice, and our data analyst, Pam Kamen, Nancy Anderson in IDL, Babe McCura and her team in food services, and all other facets of the district. I mean, again, the audit is really something which touches on every piece of our operations. So with that said, I would like to actually welcome Ms. Hoffman to go ahead and get into more details on how we did for fiscal year 21. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Drew. Is my mic on? Oh, no, it's not. Thank you. There we go. I got it on so you can hear me. Thanks so much. As you know, I was introduced a couple times. My name is Michelle Hoffman. I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, CLA. I'm definitely excited to be back here doing board meetings again. I know last year, obviously, a lot of virtual meetings. It's been so good to be back at the schools. I've been working with Hopkins Public Schools now for many years, and I don't recall if I've ever said this, but my husband is a proud alum of Hopkins High School, so I always enjoy coming here and learning more about the district he went to. So a little bit of a tie to the district as well. But I know Lance, of course, was here earlier at the workshop, went over some things a little bit more in detail. I do have a presentation today, not going to hit on all the things, some of the same kind of high-level items, but certainly we'll go over the audit results. If you have any questions as I'm going along, feel free to jump in, just kind of raise your hand, look at me. I'm absolutely happy to answer and stop while because sometimes it's helpful while I'm going over it to answer any questions. So feel free to interrupt. Just to start out with on our first main slide here with our overall audit results. Just to start out, our audit opinion. This is, ultimately the main thing you need from an independent audit firm. You need us to come in, obviously audit your financials and issue an opinion on those financial statements. We are issuing an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. It is the best opinion we can give. If we felt that we couldn't complete the audit for whatever reason, that we couldn't feel confident saying that they were free of material misstatement, we might have to disclaim it or modify our opinion. But we are issuing a clean or unmodified opinion on the fiscal 21 financial statements. Also, Yellow Book compliance. Yellow Book is just sort of the term they use to refer to government auditing standards because it literally is a yellow book, so it's called a Yellow Book standards. So any of those just kind of general government requirements that are under government auditing standards we look at, and if we had any non-compliance, we would communicate that to you today as well, but no compliance issues noted with regard to Yellow Book standards. Internal controls, this is something else we look at in addition to actually trying to determine whether we feel like the actual numbers are right. We look at the controls that go really into getting those numbers there, not only just the year-end numbers, but the day-to-day throughout the year processes. As simple as paying a bill. Director Adams earlier obviously went over some of those items, had you approve them. So looking at some of those processes, do they, review things both at the micro and macro level? Is there checks and balances in place? Is there a review over all those major transactions, year-end reconciliations, all those different types of processes that are really key to your financial statements? Of course, if a transaction could be, let's say, controlled by one person, it opens the district up to risk. So if we had any items that we felt were kind of large areas of improvement or where there was maybe a weakness, we would include that in our internal control letter as a communication to you. And we are not including any items this year in that, so we don't have any real areas where we felt that there was, kind of big areas for improvement that we wanted to communicate to you as a board. So overall, our review of internal controls looked very good. The single audit is another thing that we actually look at and test and kind of issue a letter on. You'll find it in your formal letters that you'll get next week as well. And what the single audit is referring to is actually a federal compliance audit. So any entity that expends more than $750,000 in federal funds is required to have what we call a single audit. And we take a look at all the different programs, of course, special ed, the Common One, Child Nutrition, Title I. And then this year there's some new programs that were related to the pandemic, some new federal funding that came out. And we do a risk-based approach that's based on federal guidelines as to which programs we test. So it kind of rotates larger programs in and out each couple of years. So this year we actually tested 3 programs, the Child Nutrition Cluster, of course, any lunches, breakfasts, all that kind of stuff, that whole big food service program. And then 2 new programs this year. The Coronavirus Relief Fund, of course, was a new federal program under the CARES Act, and then your Education Stabilization Fund, which is a similar, obviously, pandemic aid relief program. So we took a look at all those federal compliance items, and we do just have one item where we're going to include in our letter related to the child nutrition program and procurement. And we tested 5 contracts or sort of, procurements under that program. And there's a federal requirement that kind of at the beginning of that contract, you either do a check on a federal website to make sure that vendor is not suspended or debarred, or you can get that vendor to kind of sign something asserting that. And the district was attempting to get the vendor piece of it to sign, and they were, it sounds like being, legal team got involved, weren't really wanting to sign something. And unfortunately, it kind of went the whole year and weren't able to get that communication. So 4 of the 5 we tested were good. So we just kind of suggested, maybe if you're having the vendors being difficult, then just do that you can kind of go a different route and do your own check. And so just a suggestion we have there for that suspension debarment piece. Otherwise, the other 2 programs, we have no findings that we're reporting there. Lastly, one more final thing. We test kind of a whole slew of things here. The Minnesota Legal Compliance is a checklist that the Office of the State Auditor issues every year for us auditors to kind of take a look at. And we have to test against a lot of Minnesota state statutes that apply to school districts. So everything from making sure you have proper collateral in place over any deposits that are in excess of FDIC coverage, going through those proper bidding channels, those kinds of things. And we have one item there that we're reporting just related to, there's a requirement to file a indebtedness report to the county every year by February 1st. And it was sent just a few days later on February 4th, so technically just past that due date. So definitely pretty minor, but just something that we're including there to keep in mind on that due date for that indebtedness report. So that is our overall summary slide. So I'll flip to the next slide to get into some of the actual numbers, that you want to see. I know you've, again, went over some of these, but this is a new table or slide that you didn't have in the executive audit summary earlier. And this is really a really detailed kind of breakdown of your fund balances. And this first page is just the general fund, and then the next slide I have, several more, the rest of the funds. So the general fund, of course, is the main operating fund of the district. And what this is breaking your fund balance down into the several categories you have on the financial statement. So unassigned, that top one there really is just sort of the, everything left over. It's not restricted or assigned or, earmarked for anything. So that's sort of your residual unassigned. And then below it, we have our different categories. The biggest one, restricted, which has, as you can see, lots of subcategories. Most of those are restricted by the state of Minnesota. You get, obviously, revenue for various programs from the state of Minnesota. You have to use those funds on those programs. And then we show, as you go across for the year, the activity, the revenue you got for that year from the state, again, your expenditures, and then any ending residual fund balance you have in that program. And one of the things I like to point out when it comes to this table is looking at kind of those restricted categories. Some of the programs, the state obviously allocates you funds, and then it's kind of up to the district to decide if you want to put additional funds into those areas. So where we have the transfer in column, you can see basic skills, gifted and talented, career and technical. All of those have transfers in, meaning, you wanted to spend a little more on those programs, which can be a good thing. You want to look at and say, hey, the state only gave us so much, but we felt like these were some important areas maybe to put some more funds into. So I definitely like to kind of point that out where you can see, all right, what did the state give you? What did you feel were some maybe areas where you wanted to put some additional funds toward? And where did you end up with your fund balance? So you can see all your restrictions that are kind of left over on the side on the right there. And then you have some areas that you've sort of assigned is the category that is officially called, where the district sort of earmarks some funds and just says, we know we have these kind of projects or expenditures coming down the pipeline next couple of years, and we want to show the public that we're kind of setting them aside. It's not, required, it's not permanent, but just kind of earmark them and say, we are keeping this in mind just so that you can kind of know. And those assignments are set by finance management and you as the board. And feel free if you want to add anything on the assignment category, Torero, since I know you were involved in those numbers. All right, otherwise I will flip to the next page. And we can see here's our audited fund balance for the rest of our funds. So similar where we break it down where if there are any restrictions, we kind of split out those categories and you can see your beginning fund balance. Food service is pretty basic where most of the fund balance is restricted for food service. Community education is kind of another one where you have a few different programs underneath there, under that fund. And you can see your ending fund balance over there for community ed. And then building construction, debt service, and then your proprietary and custodial funds are that last column. Not going to get too much into that page though. So if you flip to the next page, another recap just quick on the enrollment from the prior year. So looking at fiscal 2021, here we have ADMs or average daily membership. There was a small decrease of about 0.8% in ADMs. You know, you had a couple increases from fiscal 19-20, small decrease there, as you can see, you know, about 50 students, or 50 ADMs, excuse me, from fiscal 21. I know, again, you just heard Director Adams talk a little bit about enrollment too, and kind of where everyone's at. And I've been doing a lot of board meetings. I've been working with a lot of schools and districts this year, and enrollment was definitely, for fiscal 21, was a tough sell. It seems like everyone had decreased enrollment. Sometimes I wonder where they all went. I know some went homeschooled, some went maybe private schools, but you know, I work with a couple other districts nearby who have had increases in enrollment for 10 plus years, and for the first time saw a small decrease. So I'd say, you know, 0.8%, and then it sounds like you guys are feeling pretty good about where you're at in this fall. Is certainly not a bad outcome for the pandemic and kind of all the impacts that came out of it. Another kind of piece on enrollment here, just to touch on, you know, we have a little bit more kind of interesting metrics behind the enrollment. We like to look at where you might have enrollment in or out. You know, certainly your residents can open enroll out to potentially charter schools or maybe other districts. And on the flip side, you can have open enrollment in. So right now, you know, your open enrollment in actually went up by quite a bit, you know, compared to the prior year. So you did have a nice increase there in open enrollment in. Also a small increase in open enrollment out, but I think the gap closed just a bit there between how many students are open enrolling out versus open enrolling in. And we'll flip to the next page. And here we have a kind of a 5-year look at the general funds. We can see again, you know, obviously the results from fiscal 21 as well as the past 4 years. Fiscal 21, here we can really see, you know, I had our fund balances in the previous graph, and that did have total revenues and expenditures, but this is a really good kind of snapshot summary level that general fund did have an increase in fund balance of about $6.5 million in fiscal 21. You can see revenues over expenditures, no what we call other financing sources or use items. In the bottom there, you can see, again, our fund balance kind of summarized now by all those lines, just one line item. At the very bottom, your unassigned fund balance, which is about $10.6 million, as you can see, a decrease of about increase, excuse me, of about 2.6. Ended about 10.11% of expenditures. And that's a metric, we do like to look at that metric, as it's really, you want to definitely keep that above 6 or 7% usually, just to sort of have those reserves, you know. Obviously, you kind of think of how long could we keep paying our bills, basically, if we didn't have revenue coming in, you know, if the state was holding any funds back, et cetera. So keeping that as a solid, you had a nice increase there, keeping it just over 10%. All right, I'll flip to the next page. Here we have our general fund expenditures by object for fiscal 21, as well as a little bit of a comparison for the last couple of years. So here we're looking at sort of the, you know, categories we're spending our funds on, not necessarily programs, but salaries and employee benefits, you can see we're under budget. I think that's another thing I've seen across the board, as it seems to be, you know, you just talked a little bit too about staffing shortages, and I know a lot of districts have open positions, or positions are coming open and you're having trouble filling them. So I think a lot of districts were under budget on their salaries and benefits, as maybe some of those positions were not being able to be filled. But overall, the general fund was about $2.2 million under budget for the year. And at about 2.1% that equates to. So I'll flip to the next slide here. Here we have the same graph, taking a look at our food service fund operations. And of course, you know, the food service fund has definitely had a couple interesting years here, as we're still feeling, especially fiscal 21, the full year impact of the pandemic. Fiscal 20, I was actually pretty surprised. I remember last year that it had that big of an increase. I'd say most food service funds seem to have had a deficit in fiscal 20. There was a deficit in fiscal 21, but, you know, it was, again, a challenging year. You can see the overall activity was definitely down from fiscal 20, as really most of our districts and charter schools operated that, what they call the summer food service program all year. It was operating all year, so it obviously wasn't just operating in the summer. But it's a differently structured program where the district doesn't really have to deal with getting, you know, determining income eligibility for free reduced meals. And it's a program where you can offer those basically free meals to all students and kind of take away some of that administrative burden, some of that potential, you know, more grounds for social distancing, et cetera. So as a result of that, most districts did end up serving, you know, potentially less meals. Definitely you weren't selling meals to students at the rate you were in the past. So overall activity decreased in the food service fund. So a $130,000 decrease, I should say, deficit of expenditures over revenue, small couple other financing sources. So ending at $850,000, still definitely a very kind of steady, solid fund balance, and hopefully it'll bounce back a little bit in fiscal 22. The next, you can really see, obviously, the next graph, we kind of categorized all the meals into one category as it was just sort of a different year for meal sales. So definitely went down in 2020 as the pandemic started to hit, and then we operating kind of under that summer food service program all year. Total meals went up a bit, but just putting them all rather than free, reduced, paid, it doesn't really fit into those blocks as well in fiscal 21. So we'll flip to the next page here and look at the community service fund the last 5 years. Community service fund had a nice increase there, about $250,000. It was actually quite a decent year for the community service fund, considering obviously another fund that had a lot of challenges. And similar to food service fund, decrease in activity as the whole pandemic still had impacts clearly for the whole fiscal year. So both revenues and expenditures down a little bit as certain, maybe not as many students taking advantage of certain programs, not all programs being held to the extent they were in the past. But overall, $250,000 increase in community service funds. So certainly, definitely shows good management in a fund that would have had a lot of challenges last year, and still, able to really kind of manage that fund through the pandemic to have a solid performance. So with that, I am to the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions on anything I went over, anything you've maybe seen in any of the other financial documents, I am happy to answer them.
Well, thank you so much. It's so great to be back in person with you.
I know.
And really appreciate you and your team and all the work you did on the audit report. I just have a few comments, so I'll save mine till the end and open it up for any board member questions or comments.
Well, Chair Bouchard.
Director Adams.
I don't have a question because I'm on the audit committee and I had my questions answered. But I just make a comment regarding our unassigned fund balance. I know people will look at that and say 10.11%. Wow, that's quite a bit. And it's good that it's gotten restored to that level. But our warning signal kicks in at 6%. Mm-hmm. And so, and you can tell by looking at previous years, we got pretty close there to 6% a couple of years ago. I know that in the past, when we've gone out for bond offerings, and we went to get a bond rating from Moody's or some other bond rating organization, they like to see 15%. So, I don't think we're there yet. Hopefully we can get somewhere near that, but I'd sure like to see us increase our bond rating to decrease the percentage that we pay on our borrowings. And I don't want people to get too excited about the fact that we're at 10.11% now, because I think we could add some additional surplus to that unassigned balance. So just a general comment.
Thank you, Director Adams. Director Cool.
I look at financials all day, and I've got to tell you that the change that I've seen from a year ago to now is pretty substantial, and seeing all the background work that has been done to get these numbers where it is. Quite honestly, in a year, most of the companies that I work with aren't able to do that, and they're 1/20th of your size. So it is very impressive. I agree with Director Adams that more improvement is always good down the road, but pretty darn impressive in 1 year.
Other board member comments or questions? I'd like to echo what Director Cool said. I think if we look at that general fund operations slide, it really tells a story about not only the daily work that's done by Director Chapanduka's entire department, but the really heavy structural lift that we did over a 2-year period that started with Director Chapanduka joining us. And I just think about all of the education that you did, Director Chapanduka, with the board, with our community, to really understand why we needed to make these systemic budget changes. We see it now, right, playing out on this slide. And to Director Adams' point, the unassigned fund balance, when you look at like how much that's grown in a year's time, it's phenomenal. So really, really grateful for not only that daily work, but, all of the careful planning that had to happen for 2 years in order to have an audit report like this tonight. It's really phenomenal. I also wanted to point out another success area in the community ed budget. We had, we talked about this at the workshop. There was a report that we had from community ed in 2020 in the darkest, well, I don't want to say the darkest days of the pandemic because we're still in it and who knows, right? But during some of the dark days of the pandemic, and just the reliance on the community ed services that were not being compensated, it really threw that budget into a tailspin. And I remember us being very concerned about that at the board level. Director Adams was advocating at the state level for some assistance. And so to see that budget in a much healthier place, I think reflects a lot of careful planning and discussions, around programmatic aspects, because that's tied to the health of a budget, right? And those programmatic aspects have to be both reactionary and anticipatory at the same time as we continue to move through this pandemic and really figure out what our community needs from us in that programmatic space. So just wanted to highlight that as well. And just, gratitude to everyone who worked on this report. It's like, odd. I never thought I'd hear myself say like it's like this joyful audit report, but it really is, and just very grateful for all the work that went into it. Dr. Mary Perry Reid, did you have any final thoughts?
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Yeah, I'd like to echo the gratitude and the reflections. The last couple of years have been very tumultuous, and our budget has been impacted by a number of factors. And so Truro did come at the right time and has been a tremendous asset to our team and has provided really wonderful leadership. And, as a cabinet team and also with our principals, just the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours we spent in the last couple of years analyzing all of our budget packages and moving from expenditure to revenue-based budgeting and building our predictable staffing models. There's a lot of budgeting infrastructure that has been built, and it's really important work because we owe it to our taxpayers to be really healthy fiscally. So thanks to you, Director Chapanduka, and to your team, and to all of my colleagues, and Michelle, thanks to you and your team as well for the labor that went into conducting the audit and putting together the report.
Thank you. With that, I would look for a motion that the board accept and approve the fiscal 2021 audit report.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 2021 audit report. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
Michelle.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Truro.
Michelle.
And Director Chapanduka, we're happy to have you stay with us for the next agenda item. I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reid.
Thank you very much, Chair Bouchard. So we would like to talk about the certification of the 2021-2022 tax levy. So on September of 21, the board approved the proposed 21 pay 22 property tax levy, and earlier this evening we held a truth in taxation hearing. We're grateful to the 2 community members who were with us and provided input. Thank you for your time in being here. And at this time, Director Chapanduka will present additional information for the board's consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Reid. Again, good evening, Chair Bouchard. Good evening, respective board members and the community. As alluded by the superintendent, that we held a truth in taxation presentation this evening, highlighting some of the different increases and decreases to our levy. Our levy is highly regulated by state formulas, so just to put context to the community, it's mostly the formula which determines what the levy coming into the district looks like. And there's a lot of different components and categories to the levy. So just in a nutshell, the total increase to our proposed levy for pay 22 is $1,278,126, which is 2.2%. So the total property tax levy will be $59,704,442, which, if we compare to last year in 21, our property tax levy was $58,426,300, slight 1.2. Some of the components which have led to the $1.2 million increase include a slight increase in our capital projects levy, which is the technology referendum of about $764,000. And this is an increase which is organic due to the improvements in our net tax capacity. It also bumped the property values, which also led to a natural increase in some of the different categories of the levies we receive. We also have a total increase in the general fund of about $2.4 million. But then if you factor in the reductions in the debt service, which is a reduction if we put all the factors with the long-term facility maintenance and all the other components within the debt service fund, there's a reduction of about $1.2 million or 7%. So if you factor in some of the increases and decreases, you'll find out that it's actually a wash. So with that said, would be asking for the board to actually approve our pay 22 levy of $59,704,442, which is a 2.2 increase in comparison to fiscal year 21.
Thank you very much, Director Chapanduka. Any questions or comments from board members?
I have a comment. Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Director Adams.
Every time we do this every year, I get out my own personal tax statement that I received in November. And I know a lot of people are concerned about their taxes going up. This year, at least in my neighborhood, the percent change is 8.1%. But I look at how much each of the taxing authorities raise their taxes on my house, and the school district is behind just about every one of them. And of that 8.1% increase, 7.3 of that was because the value of my property went up. And that's to be expected, and I think that's to be applauded because people look for real estate in school districts that have an excellent reputation. So why did my taxes go up 8.1% when my home value only went up 7.3? I looked down the list. Okay, Hennepin County 7.8, Metro Council 5.6, City of Minnetonka 10.4. Oh, that's where it came from. And so it's not the school district that's raising the taxes so much. It's our local municipality. And I don't know what it is in the other 6 municipalities that we serve, but I would suppose the same thing holds true. And I look at the voter approved levy, it actually decreased this year, or will decrease this year on my house. So You know, I think we're being a responsible board, and Torero is a responsible finance manager for the district, and I think we're to be envied, quite frankly, by the other taxing authorities that are imposing their property taxes on us.
Thank you, Director Adams. I was really hoping that you had brought your tax statement, because I look forward to that. And I was thinking about bringing mine. I'm like, no, he's got it. He's going to do it. So I experienced a phenomenon this year that I have not experienced during my previous 4 years on the board. I had a handful of community members reach out to me and say, we're happy to pay a little bit more, given everything that has been put on schools during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I have never received emails like that in the past or phone calls. So that was something new and definitely appreciated. I've also heard concern regarding how tax increases in general, and of course, you know, school district tax increases play a role in that, impact our community members who are on fixed income, our low-income community members, and then concerns around potential raises in rent in response to tax increases. And just to provide some additional context, you know, generally speaking, we have to work within the financial framework that's provided to us by the state. And so this reliance on local property taxes is a structural funding issue that actually underpins a lot of educational equity issues throughout the state. And this comes from the state level. So if this is something conceptually that bothers you, your state representatives would be the people to talk to about this framework that then we have to operate in as a school board.
And I would say we have a legislative action coalition that does that, that advocates with our legislators. So anyone watching, we'd love to have you.
Absolutely. We have one of the strongest LACs in the state, and this is definitely an issue that they've been working on for years. So yeah, the more the merrier with the LAC, that's for sure.
Chair Bouchard?
Yes, Director Cool.
I do have one question. So when we met on September 14th, it was my understanding that the percentage increase that you were looking at the time was 1.34%. Now it's 2.2%. And so I was trying to pick out in your conversation what exactly the details were that went from 1.34 to 2.2. Can you try to just clear that up for me just a little bit?
Sure. So when we came to the board on September 14, and our levy was showing a 1.34%, and then we proposed to the board that can we certify the levy at maximum, just because we knew we didn't have all the. So the state, what they do is they give us all these levies. Sometimes they don't have all the formulas together. So when we get the board to pre-certify a specific dollar amount or at maximum, just to give us that flexibility in case the state goes back into their formulas and make some changes. So there were some changes within the long-term facility maintenance at the state levels, which actually bumped some of those revenues to get us to the 2.2, and that flexibility allowed us to use that 2.2 increase instead of the 1.3 due to the fact that we didn't have all the pieces together.
Okay. Because when I take a look at our 2.2, and as Director Adams said, you know, both the county and the city of Minnetonka, in my case, similar to Director Adams, they're already had approved a 5.6%. And so one of the challenges that I see for residents, not only of Minnetonka, but of course, all of the other cities that are related, is the majority of people in those cities are dealing with roughly between an 8 and a 10% increase in the value of their homes, which sounds great on paper. It's super fantastic to see. The challenge is we have probably 15% of those individuals that barely can afford their homes the way they are. And so it's not necessarily just our 2.2%, but when you take a look and you add up to get to that 7 or 8% total, and then look at the 10% increase on the value of their home, there are many people that are already dealing with trying to catch up on their mortgage anyways. So I've received a lot of phone calls, especially from individuals in the city of Hopkins, that even at a 1.34%, they're deathly afraid that they're not going to be able to make ends meet. This includes both young families and then also elderly. What I found interesting is there are a lot of services that you highlighted in your presentation. And I really think that it would be beneficial for us to make sure that we provide, if the vote is a positive tonight, we really need to provide that more than just in a slideshow to make sure that the individuals of the Hopkins School District know different ways that they can mitigate these, their property tax increases. Because if it's even close to 15%, that's unacceptable if especially with what cities are doing, which I agree, it's ridiculous. Everybody should be writing a letter, especially to the mayor and city councils, to say how ridiculous some of these tax levy increases are. They're unacceptable, and honestly, they're unfair.
Sure. Yeah, and again, to just maybe give a context, as part of the presentation we did with the Truth in Taxation hearing, so just the portion of the property tax for the school district, for example, if we take a property valued at $150,000,
Yep.
And you look at what the property tax was based on the parcel of land, and what it is putting into consideration that 2.2% increase, that's amounting to about $17. That's just the portion being carried over by the school district on a property with $150,000. And then if you go to a property maybe with $1 million, that's amounting to about $132 increase spread throughout the year. Maybe just to give some context to that.
Director Cool, I like your idea of sharing those resources because I think that there are a lot of people in our community who could benefit from them and may not be aware of them. I'm wondering if that is something that could go out via the principal emails that would get them out to our families, and then we can work with our communications team on other ideas for how to push that information out.
Sure, we'll do that.
Like a paper flyer or a postcard in addition to the principal newsletters? I mean, what do you think would catch people's attention, Director Cool?
I think because we have so many residents that do not have children at the school, there may be a benefit of doing it through the principal letter and possibly a small ad in the Sun Sailor or something along those lines.
Or maybe, if there's a Sun Sailor reporter who's watching this meeting right now.
Or maybe one of us can email that reporter.
Well, and I think because the municipalities are the ones that are raising it the most this year, they ought to be taking some responsibility for that too, to try and mitigate the increases that they're imposing on their citizens.
The county is substantial as well, even though it looks like 3.5%. That overall, which they approved in September, that overall is going to be, because they range about 30 to 35% of your total property tax, that can be a decent amount depending on the value of your home.
one of our communication mechanisms is the update that goes
Right.
out to all district residents, but I'm thinking the timing on that
Right.
wouldn't work,
Wouldn't
right?
align, right.
I have to admit, when my tax statement came, I just sort of ripped it open in the car and I was like, what's going on? So was there an insert in there that described these services?
I don't remember, I don't think so.
I don't recall that there was,
Okay,
no. And I'm looking on the back of mine, and there's nothing on there about, possible credits you could apply for or anything. I did call in because I noticed, I used to get something called a homestead exclusion, which reduced the value of my property by $412, big deal. But this year it's zero. And I called and I said, how'd that go down to zero? And I found out once your house goes over $415,000 and $200 in value, you lose it. I don't know how the legislature arrived at that number, but you lose that exclusion. So there's a lot of quirks to property tax law in the state. And I would actually advise, if anyone has a tax preparer that they work with, that have your tax preparer identify what credits you're eligible for. Because mine does, and he'll fill out the forms, and all of a sudden in August, I'll get a check sometimes. Some years I do, some years I don't. But
And Resource West is a good place to go as well.
that's true.
Yeah. They have a lot of help for renters or anyone with home issues.
Right.
and they work with Prepare and Prosper, I believe is the name of the firm that helps with tax prep.
Yep.
So that would be a good resource.
Yeah.
But we'll continue to think about how we can get this information out and maybe work with our city partners on that.
Right.
Any further comments or questions? With that, I would look for a motion that the board approve the resolution establishing school district tax levies authorized for general and special purposes.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution establishing school district tax levies authorized for general and specific purposes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move into our last agenda item, which is our board goals mid-year evaluation. We set these goals together as a board in the fall. This is one of the ways that our community first can understand what we're working on throughout the course of the school year as a board. We have all of these mandated actions that we have to take at certain times throughout the year. You just witnessed one of them, right? So we have that calendar that's always kind of pushing us forward. And then each year we identify goals that come from our conversations with community members that we want to work on throughout the year as a board. And so this year we've been working within 4 pretty robust goal areas. And I will talk through 3 of them, and then Director Peterson's going to help me with goal area 3 because that focuses more on policy, and she serves on the monitoring committee. So our first goal area has to do with calendar and schedule equity. So at our last meeting, we voted on the learning parameters redesign, and a large part of that conversation was schedule related, so changing start times. And so that, we've done part of that work already. I think the work that's ahead of us is really looking at the calendar pieces. Some concerns that we've heard from community members are around the late starts, around different cultural and religious holidays. And so as we move into our calendar discussions and approval process, I think we really have the opportunity to look at some of those components that we haven't talked about specifically as a board yet. So if we look at goal area 2, which is a Vision 2031 aligned budget, tonight, really marks the beginning of our budgeting process. I always say January is when our budgeting process starts, but really accepting the audit report to have a really solid understanding of how we came out of the last fiscal year is essential for us as a board as we move into goal setting for next year. So we will be continuing on this process in January. The next kind of big ticket item is the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee report that we'll receive in January. And then pretty much at every budget or every workshop or meeting, we're going to be discussing the budget until that preliminary approval in March, and then the final approval in June. So some of the work ahead of us, really involves identifying how we want to do our community engagement around the budget, thinking through what was effective and what wasn't last year, learning from that, and deciding what types of, what process and what types of approaches we want to use to make sure that our community is really involved in that budgeting process. One of the measurable impact points there under goal area 2 is the board will actively engage more community members in state and federal advocacy for public school funding through the LAC. And I just want to say that Director Adams, just made a huge step in that direction tonight. So we're always working on that. And, it was really exciting during the campaign season. Of course, I was having lots of conversations around school finance and lots of curiosity around the American Rescue Plan dollars and, how schools were spending those and everything. And it was a big topic of conversation. And so I had the opportunity to talk a lot about our Legislative Action Coalition and, the advocacy work that needs to happen right now during COVID, and then as we move to the future. So looking forward to continuing that budgeting process. I'll go down to goal area 4. So new board member orientation and culture building. So we set this goal in the fall, knowing that we would have at least one new board member. We will have 2 new board members, Jason Ross and Rachel Hartland, who will be sworn in at our first board meeting in January. And so we've done a lot of work to onboard them and welcome them into board work. So we've developed that interactive guidebook and created the holistic onboarding process. We are planning to attend the MSBA conference in January, both returning board members and new board members. At our workshop this evening, we talked about a board retreat that we're trying to get scheduled for February, and it always sounds so fancy, the last board retreat we did at the high school, it was very nice. We did have sandwiches, but I don't want you to think we're flying somewhere for a retreat. That's not the case. It's a very cost-efficient retreat. And, a half-day opportunity for us to just spend some time together. It's formatted as a workshop. Anytime we have a quorum of the board or more, that's a public meeting. And so, technically that retreat is open to the public if people want to come observe. And it's that'll be a really great chance for us to do this first key action item, identifying laws versus culture, engaging in conversation about what we want our new board culture to be with our new members and what sort of practices could support that. So I'll turn it over to Director Peterson to talk a bit about goal area 3.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Bouchard. So in goal area 3, what I would say is we have definitely, I would say we are trucking through our policies. One of the things I think that has really helped with this work over the past few weeks is the addition of Parker on our policy board to really make sure that student voice is heard. So that's been super helpful. We do look at every policy with our equity lens. That was part of the goal setting from our beginning of the year, is that we're really looking at it with an equity lens. So absolutely have been doing that, making small changes and tweaks to some of the more mundane policies, I would say. And then, looking at things with a much broader context, policies that are going to be definitely more of a heavy lift. For example, the discipline policy. So we talked about that one in particular during our last meeting. We did learn that the MSBA is working to create a model policy around some of the same shifts that we were looking at. And we talked as a policy committee about whether or not we wanted to table that work until the MSBA provided us with kind of a model policy, or if we wanted to continue to move forward. And as a monitoring committee, we did decide to continue our work on that. We felt that that was one of the policies that perhaps we've been kicking the can down the road a little bit on, and we really wanted to focus on in the back half of this year, and making sure that we were putting the equity lens to that, as well as student voice to that. And in light of, the mental health and everything, we really felt like that policy needed to be addressed by us. So that's kind of going to be our big heavy lift in the back part of this year. We also are currently reviewing racial equity policies from other local and, well, frankly, national. I think one of them was a college. I don't have access right now, so I can't review exactly where they came from. But so we're definitely still working on all this. Got a little derailed, I would say, in November with potentially having to have the vaccine mandate policy. So that derailed us a little bit from, the plan on other stuff. But I would say for sure moving forward on student conduct and discipline and racial equity.
Thank you very much. So a lot of our community members know that at our next workshop, one of our agenda items is holistic student safety. And so I think that conversation will also, really inform some of that work that lies ahead on the student conduct policy. So appreciate the update. I say this all the time, I'm going to say it again, that we put such a heavy lift on the monitoring committee when we set these goal areas. We did it last year, and we're doing it this year again. And, they just sit over there cool as cucumbers, and they're totally fine with it. No.
Yeah, the way I look at it, Jen, is it'll be 2 or 3 years of really hard work, but it'll get us where we need to get to, and hopefully then we can look at them and get back to check, check, check.
Yeah, absolutely, because in addition to crafting new policy, we review all of our district policies. It goes through a cycle. So there's, similar to like our board calendar, there's this cycle that the monitoring committee is always working on. And then with this goal area 3, you can see some of these heavier lift policies that the team's been working on as well, and really grateful for that. So that concludes our board goal review. Is there anything any of you wanted to add to that summary?
I think it's a good summary of what we've done so far. I feel pretty good about it. This is better than most mid-year evaluations that I've experienced. I think we've made a lot of progress.
Yeah, I agree, and I just think it's so helpful to return to these goals regularly and check in and see how we're doing. So appreciated the opportunity tonight. No action is needed on this particular item, so we can move into board member reports. Who'd like to go first?
I will.
Great.
Not a whole lot to report on during the Thanksgiving break, but I did attend on November 27th, 2 days after Thanksgiving, the class of 2000 reunion.
Oh.
not because I'm a member of that class, but.
I was gonna say.
You had to think about that for a second, didn't you?
You look great
Yeah,
for a
thank you.
40-year-old.
I'm aging rapidly. But no, our daughter was on the organizing committee for that, and we agreed to serve at the registration desk. So got to see a lot of and they had to do it a year late because of the pandemic, but got to see a lot of the friends and acquaintances that she had during her years at Hopkins High School. Then December 3rd, AMSD met, and I did attend that in person for the second month in a row. Great presentation by the Director of Racial Justice Initiative at the University of St. Thomas, Dr. Uhuru Williams. I don't know if you attended via Zoom, but you know, a lot of times we have these presenters and they talk about things that we ought to be doing and, you know, what we're doing wrong, you know, what we could do to correct it. And this guy came in front of us and said he wasn't going to do that this time. He was there as a cheerleader. And he really complimented AMSD for coming up with the Reimagine Minnesota document that kind of laid out how do we implement racial equity in our schools across the state. And he just was there to encourage us to keep on the process, to keep working at it. And he was impressed that Minnesota had a document like that because he came from out east. He grew up in Connecticut, and I think he came to Minnesota from Delaware, I think he said, and he never saw anything like that in any of the states that he was at. So, you know, it's something that I think we can be proud of, that we're working on that. And then on December 4th, Director Andreessen and I attended the MSBA Delegate Assembly via Zoom. Unfortunately, the in-person meeting was canceled, and it was held as a Zoom meeting. But we had 3 resolutions presented by the Hopkins Board. 2 of them related to free and reduced free and reduced meals, and both of them passed by a wide margin.
Yay.
So we were pleased with that. Now the real work begins in trying to get the legislature to implement this stuff. But at least with that being passed, we'll get some assistance from the MSBA legislative team. So one of them said that we ought to extend free and reduced meals indefinitely to all students. And we'll see what reception that gets at the legislature. Although with a $7.7 billion surplus, maybe it will be possible. But the other one, I think, is real, has some real legs to it. For years, the compensatory revenue piece of school funding has been based on free and reduced meal applications. And I think it's kind of strange when you think about it, that parents who are the ones who fill out the free and reduced lunch applications are therefore responsible for getting this additional revenue for school districts. That does not make sense to me. And I had a conversation recently with a board member in another school district who said his family, when he was growing up, he was had a single mom, and he said that she would not apply for free and reduced lunch, even though they qualified for it. Because she said, we've got friends, we've got family that will take care of us. We are not going to go and ask the school district to provide this. And that means that any compensatory revenue that they could have gotten in that school district was denied because they did not go through the process. And I think it's really not fair that compensatory revenue should be the responsibility of parents. I think that should be, there are other ways to measure poverty in a school district, all of which are not the responsibility of parents. And I think, well, we'll be lobbying for that disconnect in the coming legislative session, and hopefully we'll get some support from MSBA on doing that as well. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Adams.
Chair Bouchard, I'd like to go next.
Yes, Director Khan.
On Thursday, December 2nd, I went to the Hopkins Educators of Color Mentorship Gathering, or the second gathering. And you know, I know we have a lot of people of color now in our school district, staff, teachers, et cetera. And the great thing is that we were able to host a lot of these people online and get their participation. Not all, I think there were about 123 that were invited. Of course, not all of them could make it, but a significant amount, I'd say like maybe 30, 40. And I thought that was good. It looked like it, at least, 30, 40. Most of them were online. Anyways, we had a great discussion just regarding students and connecting with them, especially for people who are not familiar with people from other ethnicities or backgrounds. And what really stuck out to me was regarding educating the whole child. Each child has their own environment, and they feel safe in certain areas with, you know, people that they can relate to. And regarding research about this topic, they point to some overarching issues, which include lack of trust, lack of communication, and lack of representation. So it's really great that our school district has this initiative to represent our students of color and have that reflected in our staff so that they can connect better. So that's one of the things that really stood out. That trust element and that connectivity. So, yeah.
Good.
Wonderful, thank you.
Chair Bouchard.
Director Cool.
So over the last several weeks, and actually the last couple of months, my family and I have been doing an amazing amount of research on a topic that we talk about almost every meeting here, and that is mental health. And so, you know, one of the greatest things that I have appreciated about this board is that each person has kind of brought their own learnings and a lot of times stories about their own life to the board table to, you know, really give more information for not only the individuals that are watching the meeting, but those that may hear about it in the long run. And so there's a couple of reasons why I'm bringing this up. But in my family, we have dealt with one of our children needing additional help, specifically around mental health, like so many kids at the high school and the middle school and even the elementary school. And what's really interesting is we've talked about so many programs being hard to get into or hard to find somebody to help. We, as a family, have spent an enormous amount of time working through that system and have had amazing success, though an enormous amount of effort has had to be made to be able to get services for our child. And so I think it's important for all of us to know that when we are looking at what we can do to help, you know, either by giving money or assisting with our time or resources, I have to tell you there's so many services out there right now that one of the pieces that they do for the community is helping young people with mental health. And so as any of you are looking for things to give money to, either at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year, we really need to be all thinking about the mental health piece. Because when we started looking at different programs, a 14-week a 30-week, 60-week wait was very common with almost every program we reached out to. And it is a very sad fact that when you are able to get into a program quickly, it's usually because there was a catastrophic issue for another family. And I think that's a reality that we all need to be thinking about, especially in our conversations when it comes to the challenges that we see at the high school or other challenges, that we really need to make sure, as Dr. Mary Perry Reid said earlier, is that there's a lot of times that all of us as professionals or parents, we come across situations where we see children that are having a hard time with things. I really think it's our responsibility to ourselves and to these children to almost be a mandatory reporter to make sure that they're getting help. Because there are so many cases right now, even with all of the great, amazing staff that we have at the school and other places. Sadly, I've seen in the programs that we've researched that there are hundreds of kids falling through the cracks just here in the Twin Cities that we don't even know about unless you happen to be connected to one of the programs. That's my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So important. It's something that we're seeing a lot of in the community college space as well. And so I appreciate your call to action, thinking through some of these nonprofits that exist and how we can support those with financial resources if that's a possibility for folks. Director Peterson, did you have anything? The only reason I'm checking is I'm about to talk for a really long time.
You already spoke, so you're okay.
It's because you may have noticed Vice Chair Andreessen is not at the table this evening, and so she sent me a statement to share with all of you. So I'll start with that. Good evening, board colleagues and community. Intermediate District 287 has employed School Exec Connect, an organization that specializes in finding leaders for school districts to help us find a new superintendent to replace Sandy Lewandowski, who is retiring. This company was also employed by Hopkins when we searched for a new superintendent. We are in the final stages of that process. We had 12 applicants from across the country, even one international candidate. First round interviews with the 7 candidates that met our criteria were conducted last week, and this week, our 3 finalists are engaging in a day-long series of interviews. Finalists are meeting with students, staff, member districts, and the community. Each stakeholder group completes a feedback form on the candidate, which is given to the board to inform our second interview. Tonight, as you meet, I will be part of the second candidate's interview with the District 287 board. This has been a thoughtful process with lots of key stakeholder input. As a board, we have received implicit bias training, specifically as it relates to hiring, as well as keeping our racial equity impact tool at the forefront as we walk through this process. I appreciate all the community input as this helps the board make a holistic decision. It will be hard to replace Superintendent Lewandowski, who is a thoughtful leader and a fierce advocate for families with unique needs. You can get updates on the candidate search at the District 287 website. I look forward to announcing our new superintendent at the next Hopkins School Board meeting. So we thank Vice Chair Andreessen for her service on the District 287 board. We missed you this evening, Vice Chair Andreessen, and we thank you for your good work. So I will end with my own board reports. Now it's my voice. This past Saturday, I attended a rally in Hastings to support transgender students, specifically the child of the current school board chair, who had experienced harassment from members of the Hastings community during her reelection campaign. It was a very well-attended event, over 250 people, including some of our state legislators, including our very own Cheryl Joachim from Hopkins. Unfortunately, the targeting and harassment of school board members is a national phenomenon, and it is unacceptable. I am, as I reflect on our experiences as a board over the past year, I'm grateful that the vast majority of the interactions that I've had with our community members have been very respectful and focused on the issues instead of devolving into personal attacks. So it's along these lines and with a spirit of gratitude that I'd like to acknowledge the dozens of community members that I've been able to converse with over email, by phone, and in person over the past 2 weeks regarding the social climate at the high school and junior highs. For the most part, these conversations have really been solution-focused and rooted in a deep care for our community. Throughout these conversations, several major themes have emerged. And these include the need for stronger relationships between students, staff, and families, as well as a highly coordinated approach to supporting students. A need for clarity in communication so that we are all on the same page as a community regarding policies and processes, and the need to change some of these to be more anticipatory and restorative. A need for clarity regarding the relationship between schools and our police departments, including having a conversation around shared expectations. A need to understand adolescent brain development during these conversations. The recognition of staff exhaustion, the fact that we remain short-staffed, and that at times the needs of our students currently exceed our available resources. This is certainly a symptom of the pandemic, but it's also a symptom of decades of underfunding our public schools. Another area of concern has been the harmful impacts of using racialized language to describe complex social dynamics in which we all participate. The importance of student data privacy, the concept of healthy social media use, and then looking at expanding partnerships with organizations. So, along the lines of what Director Kuhl was talking about, that can help us with support around both mental health and restorative practices. So a couple of the steps that I've taken over the past 2 weeks are to work with Commissioner Latendrous' office on identifying potential county funding for mental health support, or to help us fund the creation of a mentorship model that team members within the district are currently working on. Dr. Lightfoot, Vice Chair Andreessen, and I met with the Legal Rights Center the other day. It's a local nonprofit that specializes in restorative practices and policy building, to see if some of their work in other districts and communities can help inform our next steps here in Hopkins. So we'll discuss some of these issues in more detail at our December 14th workshop on holistic student safety. But in the meantime, I wanted to lift up these community members who are really leaning in and actively seeking to be part of the solution. Lastly, I mentioned this briefly during our goals conversation, but I've had such a wonderful time meeting with our incoming board members, Jason Ross and Rachel Hartland. They are both incredibly dynamic community members who are going to make excellent leaders on the school board. It's been a privilege to be part of their onboarding, and we are currently working on the details for our swearing in. I get to be sworn in again too. I kind of lost track of that. I was like, oh wait, on January 4th. So we hope that you can join us for that event. And that's what I have. I received no public comment cards at the beginning of before the meeting began. So no public comment for items not on the agenda. So our final
agenda item is adjournment. And with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion, an enthusiastic motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:50 p.m.